Traditionally, whenever you're using bevel, when it came to Boxcutter, you would draw your shape, and then you could press B in order to bevel. But you also had the ability to press Q during bevel in order to add what's called a Q bevel. The thing about our bevel is whenever you bring the points all the way in and bring them back out, it converts from a bevel to a chamfer and vice versa. So that's one quick way to just jump between one segment and 6 segments on the fly whenever you're dealing with bevel. But another thing about Q bevel is that it gave way for us to be able to do a reverse bevel. So reverse bevel is actually us pressing Shift F and basically flipping the shape. However, if we move the bevel dot, we see that whenever we adjust the chamfer, that it's not looking so good on the reverse bevel, because we actually want the reverse bevel to have one segment and we want the rest of the shape to actually remain smooth. But with our previous configuration methods, that wasn't actually possible. However, if we press D and bring up the MiniHelper, we see that we're now able to do such things. So we can actually go to the second bevel and adjust the settings independently, and also even adjust this width. We see that as we adjust the width, it's not able to go past a certain distance due to a clamp on the bevel. By clicking this lock, we can actually unclamp it and move this past dimensions that are previously unable to even be obtained to get a larger than life bevel happening. And so this is the level of control that is now available to users whenever they use the bevel modifier inside of Boxcutter via the new helper. So let's just right click and cancel, and let's talk about doing this without any hotkeys whatsoever. So we just draw a shape, extrude, pause with tab, press D, click on bevel. Let's just control roll some segments. We click on this option to bevel the back face. Maybe have to click it twice in order to trigger it. And then from here we have a secondary bevel where its option is actually to flip the bevel, which gives us this shape. And from here we can actually make fine adjustments. So one day we'll get to the point where we'll be drawing reverse bevels by default. But due to us having flipped the normals, it is a bit of a conundrum with the ability to flip normal shapes in an inverted direction when we have systems built in place to prevent such things. So for that reason, it is currently a stepped process, but we wanted to make it as seamless as possible for users of all skill levels to be able to get in and enjoy reverse beveling. In fact, let's just click and apply. We could press D, switch over to circle. Let's just draw a circle, press tab. We could press D, jump over to bevel, click on the reverse icon, and there we are, just affecting our reverse bevel on this particular circle. Of course, we can move our mouse off in order to adjust this thing independently via clicking, since we did trigger a modal interaction. So now we have our reverse bevel going with this shape. So the only shape that doesn't have reverse bevel is Ngon. So to just demonstrate it in action, what we would get with it is, let's just draw an Ngon shape, bring it in, we'll press D, we'll choose to bevel, where we'll just go into 3D view and roll our mouse to adjust the segments, repause it and re-enter, and we'll add a Q bevel, and let's just try flipping it. So we see that because it doesn't have reverse bevel, it actually just flips the shape on the Z instead of flipping the normal and then flipping the shape on the Z, which is actually what happens with the other shapes. So a system will have to be made for that. But with each tool that we're adding it to, with each shape, it does get a little bit more tricky as far as the solutions and keeping them fluid with previous solutions of the past. So its day will come, but just keep in mind that reverse bevel doesn't support Ngon at this time, but Q bevel does. So whenever it comes to the bevel slider and the D helper, there's a little bit more in depth that we can talk about with it. Generally, whenever you have bevel enabled and you don't have backface beveling enabled, that means that whenever you draw a shape, you're beveling it on a 2D level, basically resulting in a 2D cut. However, if we were to tap this to live and press D, we are able to, from here, click the bevel backface, and we could also choose to basically reverse the bevel, giving us a reversed bevel result. So this is something that should be fairly straightforward as of this version of Boxcutter. However, let's talk about it a little bit more in depth. If we press D, we see that the Q bevel is already activated, and there's an additional option where instead of beveling the back face, we can also choose to bevel the front face, and that will do exactly what you think it does. If we click and drag, we are now creating a beveled box that's now being beveled on both the interior face and the exterior face, as well as on every single edge. So if we press tab, we can drop this shape, press D, go into the helper, and we see that we now have three options at our disposal. So we can just hold control and scroll to adjust the bevel for the main bevel. We can add some segments to the lower bevel if desired, and we can even increase the width of the upper bevel. We see that we're not able to take it very far due to the limitations on the clamp overlap. So by clicking this icon, we're able to simply unlock it, and just like that, we're able to draw a reverse beveled box without having to go through the process of having to click through the button. So to show it again, with those settings already enabled, all we have to do is just draw a box, and that box is already set up. However, we can see from this cut that more than likely we'll be needing to revisit the way that reverse bevel on a start position is actually initialized in the future, so that we can maintain a good curvature on the outside and keep the simplified bevels happening for both the interior and the exterior bevels. Another aspect we can talk about is circle. So if we click on circle, we see that circle also has the same bevel back face, bevel front face behavior. So if we were to basically click and drag to create a circle, we see our shaders inverted, and whenever we click and drag, we are now drawing a reverse beveled circle that's beveled on both the interior and exterior. However, because the reverse bevel system is still very new and its integration with circles incomplete, we see that instead of having two modifiers as you would probably desire, we only have one. And whenever we adjust the settings for it, we're actually adjusting only the segments at the bottom, but we're able to deal with the bevel of both of them together whenever we're dealing with the width. So this is a bug of sorts. However, we will be resolving this in the future, aiming to give you individual control over bevels whenever it comes to things. So when it comes to dealing with bevel both front face and back face, it is something fairly new to Boxcutter when it comes to reverse bevel. So it's definitely one of those things that you'll just have to see how it expands on future releases. So if we click to apply, that's complete. And another thing I want to talk about is Ngon. Ngon's one of my favorites whenever it comes to using bevel. However, it's not my favorite when it comes to using the Q bevel or the back face bevel, so we'll just uncheck that. And what I mean by liking Ngon with bevel is that we can draw shapes, and we see that this shape is actually already beveled whenever it comes to Ngon. So while the bevel is actually not looking very good at this particular second because we have simplified segments, we are able to snap as if we're not beveling, and we could even press D to bring up our helper and adjust the amount of segments that we're seeing, lower the amount of distance that we're getting here, and let's even right click and cancel or press escape to completely cancel and just basically redraw this Ngon. So now we're actually getting rounded points as we're creating this shape, and this is something that I didn't notice was resolved in a previous update to Boxcutter, was the ability to actually draw beveled Ngons on the fly. A popular question that we get with users is how do you deal with the particular beveling of individual points at this time, and the answer is that you simply have to shift it to live and actually use HardOps for it at this moment. But one of the next things on our list is definitely getting back to dealing with Ngon points. So to show that in action, let's say I actually wanted to minimize or mitigate some of the bevel amounts that I have on some of these edges. Well, I can just tab into edit mode, press 2 to go into edge mode, select a couple of edges that we want to lower the bevel amount on, and if we just alt click mark, we're able to just lower the bevel weight. So whenever it comes to us automating the points to be able to control this, it's the same situation. It's just going to be us controlling the bevel weights of these individuals, but we can take it down to 0, which basically results in it getting no bevel, and we keep our bevel just isolated to this one particular area. But in a nutshell, just wanted to do a little bit more talking about bevel and its approach with Boxcutter and how you can utilize it to the fullest when it comes to bevel front face and bevel back face, which is only available with certain aspects of Boxcutter. For example, with Ngon, we don't have reverse bevel capability, so you see that another option doesn't actually enable itself. But if we were to jump over to Box and we go into bevel, we see that there is an option for us to bevel the front face on the way in. But keep in mind that by unchecking this, you can just get in and select your shape and draw, and it will just bevel with a Q bevel just on the interior on the way in. And then if you want to flip it, of course, you can always just press D, choose the reverse bevel button, and from there you have a reverse bevel that you're able to adjust, unclamp, and fix to perfection.